Subscribe to the channel below this video to catch the next story, and don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. Dear viewers, today we present to your attention 3 fascinating stories. Sit down comfortably, and let's begin. I debated for a long time whether to send this or not. I've already sent it to a couple of bloggers, but they refused to publish it, saying there were too few details. They said they'd publish it if I added some spicy details. Otherwise no one would read or listen, and they needed ratings. What happened to me and my family is something you typically keep private. After all, my wife and I have been together for a little over 18 years in an official marriage and lived together for 7 years before that. During our cohabitation, our daughter was born, and in the marriage my wife gave me a son. Over the years we rarely had major fights. In the early days of our life together, when we sorted out the status of my and her parents, we had small arguments. But we learned to compromise. I am 50, and my wife is 47. I won't tell you how we lived. Just that we weren't poor and even lived well. We had our own home, a vacation house, a car, a garage, and an apartment that we rented out. It all started when my wife decided to learn to drive. This surprised me because I had repeatedly offered to teach her, but she always refused, saying she was scared and preferred me driving her. But she decided to go for it, passed the test, and I bought her flowers and a small gift. I reserved a table at a cafe with light snacks and a chilled bottle of white wine, her favorite. Then she expressed a desire to have her own car. Not just any car like a Honda or a Kia, but a Mercedes B200. This surprised me since I drove a simple Lotta Largus and thought she'd ask for something like a Prius, especially since we didn't have that kind of money. Despite my arguments, she wouldn't change her mind. I thought, we live once, and if she wants a good car, let her have it. We found the right car in a dealership and took out a loan. I started noticing that she took longer to get ready when she went out, spending extra time on makeup and checking herself in the mirror. Naturally, I asked where she was going, and she said she was meeting friends for shopping or visiting a cafe. She also started ignoring me when it came to doing things together like going to the movies or a restaurant. This was frustrating since we used to do these things together. The kids, of course, were happy that their mom looked more stylish. Our daughter had her own family, and our son had moved to another city. Meanwhile, I noticed our finances were getting tighter. My wife was spending not only her money, but also our joint savings. We had a family bank account that we both contributed to after getting paid. But I noticed her contributions had stopped. When I asked, she said the tenants moved out of her apartment, and she was renovating it. At home, my wife almost stopped cooking, leaving that to me, and even cleaning and laundry became my responsibility. She also started working late, claiming she needed to pay off the car loan, but our money situation didn't improve. She also stopped answering my calls frequently. I tried talking to her, but she avoided the conversation. One day, our daughter came over and mentioned seeing her mom with a young man in her car and hearing a male voice when she called her. I confronted my wife, asking directly if she was seeing someone else. She looked at me like I was crazy and denied it. Her tone reminded me of our early days when we first lived together. Then she got a new phone, but lost it the next day. I stopped transferring money to our joint account, and for the first time in years, we had a big fight. Our daughter then came over and told me she had visited my wife's apartment, found a new door and lock, and a young man, possibly an immigrant, opened the door. He tried to stop her, but she insisted it was her mom's apartment and would call the police if he didn't let her in. She found my wife there in a short silk robe. My wife claimed she was there for maintenance. I called my wife, who was supposed to be out with friends, and her phone was off. She came home hours later, drank a glass of her favorite white wine, and told us she was leaving me for someone else. Our daughter tried reasoning with her, but it was no use. My wife left that night. I later found out from her close friend that she met her lover at a supermarket where he worked. She needed a car to get closer to him, and within a month, they had their first encounter in the car. Soon after, she moved her tenants out and moved him in. She started supporting him financially. A year has passed, and I've learned that her lover brought 2 brothers and an uncle from his homeland to live with them. Now, they live like a large family. My ex-wife hinted that she regretted her choices, but knew there was no way back. She is now trying to evict her lover and his relatives from her apartment. I don't know if she'll succeed. Hello, friends. Here's my story. My wife and I have been together for 20 years. Dear viewers, More than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue. Our son is 20 and our daughter is 16. 6 years ago, I lost interest in her as a woman and, I admit, I sought satisfaction through paid intimacy outside our marriage. My wife found out through indirect signs. We had a conversation and she asked me to stop. Foolishly, I told her she no longer excited me as a woman. We decided to live separate lives, sleeping in different beds, but didn't tell the children. Our household routine remained the same. A year later, I began to suspect she was having an affair with her boss. She had frequent business trips with him and other indirect signs. She swore she wasn't involved with anyone and wasn't interested in intimacy after a serious gynecological surgery. Recently, she'd been avoiding intimacy with me as well. I suffered and eventually bugged her car. Yesterday, I overheard their conversation. She was accusing him of having an affair with another woman, and he was denying it. To my surprise, he accused her of sleeping with me, and she was defending herself, saying she wasn't. Over the last 4 years, she had hidden her affair from me expertly. When she came home late that night, she cried all night. I couldn't sleep either. In the morning, she claimed to have problems at work. A month ago, we celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary at her request. She asked me to buy her flowers occasionally. Sometimes when I'm late, she calls to check who I'm with. One evening, I confronted her and used some harsh words. She said I had killed all her feelings for me when I admitted to my infidelity. She didn't see physical betrayal as true betrayal and argued she needed satisfaction too. She suggested I find a new, active woman and live with her in the apartment next door, which our neighbors rent out. Meanwhile, she proposed we continue living as before, asking not to tell the kids or her mother. She even claimed she had thought of confessing everything to me and had gone to church to repent. I decided to take a pause. I felt worse than I ever had. Though she still excites me as a woman, there's no love, but also no hate. There's a strange attachment and a desire to maintain our comfort zone. I know we need to separate, but the thought of finding a new place and starting over is tough. For now, I'll wait and ponder my next steps. I recorded this much later after the events. Initially, I didn't send it to anyone, just waited. Here's what happened. I realized I couldn't live without her. I accepted her proposal to stay and rebuild our relationship. Our intimate life is gradually improving. She comes home early, cooks dinner, and we sleep together again. I no longer visit prostitutes. It's disgusting to me. I'm entirely dedicated to the family. She said she could only be in one relationship with me and I shouldn't worry. However, she can't quit her job. I understand this as she has to interact with her former lover for work. According to her, their relationship is strictly professional now. I've even been present during some of their interactions. She seems dependent on him as he assigns her tasks. He visited our city for a week, and she drove him to work daily with my consent since his car was broken, and he didn't want to take a taxi. I listened in and heard him making advances, which she rejected. Later, she defended herself, saying I was shocked to learn about them. She claimed I had feelings, referring to me. She asked our son to translate a text for him. They apparently communicate directly. He even helped our son with his things when they were in Europe. Now he's back in Europe, and she calls him every morning before work and after work on her way home. I listen to their conversations, where they plan their day. Recently, he told her he broke up with his girlfriend, whom she was jealous of. She replied indifferently. He complained about his failing business and wanting to keep her close. She assured him nothing had changed, saying her nerves were steel. I confronted her, and she claimed their relationship was purely human, not romantic. She said I was her priority, and he needed support during this critical time. She described him as a younger, dependent man, like a mama's boy. She said their professional relationship was inseparable, but minimized their interactions. I suggested we get married in church, but she refused, saying we weren't ready and needed to confess first. I'm consumed with doubt, spending my free time spying on her and struggling to sleep. They no longer talk in the car, and my bug doesn't work. I suggested bugging her phone, but she refused, saying it would be unpleasant to know I was listening to her private conversations. Now they are traveling together for work, along with another colleague, and will stay in the same house. She asked me to call her often to stay in touch. I promised and am taking care of our daughter. The night before they left, we had passionate sex, and I feel like I'm falling in love with her again. I know many will criticize me, call me foolish, and tell me to leave her. But I love this woman and want to keep our family together. I'm not sure if it will work, but I'll try. We're planning for the future, like going to the gym together and renovating our room, but his presence bothers me. I'm tired of spying and feel there's deception. I'll keep watching for signs. Sooner or later, her true self will show. Hello, everyone. My story is divided into 2 parts and demonstrates that there is some global justice and retribution in the world. Both parts are rather banal, but combined, they turn out to be quite interesting, although the real issue is in the second part. I think it's better to start with a bit of a preface. My wife and I have been together for 11 years, married for almost 7, and we have an adorable daughter who is 6. We both adore her. My wife is truly a treasure for our family. She cooks, takes care of the house, and looks after her husband. I say this not just because I love her deeply, but because it's true. There is a slight issue, though. Intimately, we're not the most passionate. This is an important point for the story. I'm quite a romantic person, but in my early years I was in a relationship with a morally corrupt woman, which left me scarred. In other words, my outward romantic expressions are limited, and this is another crucial point in the story. In terms of intimacy, my interests are much broader than my wife's, and here begins the first part of the story. 4 years ago, I unknowingly started losing interest in intimate relations with my beloved wife. My male polygamy began to take over. It's not that I went astray, but I became increasingly interested in other women. All it took was the right circumstances, and they, of course, presented themselves. I cheated. I wanted to find another word, but the alternatives seemed hypocritical. This would have been bad enough, but I made a monstrous mistake. I continued the relationship with that woman. I didn't think about what would come of it. Serotonin completely took over my mind. I was so happy that I nearly shared the good news with my wife during dinner. Ultimately, it became clear that something had to be done. Living in limbo was impossible. I proposed a divorce. There were tears, pleas, screams, suicide attempts, theatrical, I should note, threats and curses, everything. I'm a soft person and almost gave in because I felt so sorry for her. But I knew that no matter how painful it was, I had to put an end to it. I remained firm. A few days passed. I was living in a studio apartment and continued to see my new lover. One night, while working, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I suddenly realized I was making a terrible mistake. My wife was the only person close to me besides our child, and no twisted intimacy could replace what I was losing. In short, it dawned on me, and I returned home that very night. Rebuilding family ties was difficult, to say the least, but things gradually improved. I learned a valuable lesson about the difference between love and infatuation. Things even got better than before. But as time went on, everyday life began to take its toll on our family life again. At the same time, something changed in me. I became extremely irritable, not just within the family, but in general. I started erupting like a volcano, but I still treated my wife with warmth and love, even if it was no longer apparent. This brings us to the second part of this long narrative. A few months ago, I began to notice on some subconscious level that my wife was distancing herself from me. At first, I didn't pay it much attention, but in the past month, her detachment became glaringly obvious. We decided to spend New Year's Eve together, an intimate dinner in dim lighting. We even took our child to her grandparents. We sat down, but I could see she was barely staying awake. The whole event didn't stir any emotions in her. There were also the usual signs: late hours at work, urgent business trips to another city. Let me emphasize this crucial point. I asked her jokingly if she had an intimate text conversation with a secret friend when she tried to snatch her phone away. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. She laughed it off, saying she was planning a surprise, arranging for a game disc, knowing I love video games. She never did show me the phone. I'm not stupid. Thoughts immediately began to form. I tried talking to her several times, asking direct questions. Is there someone else? She denied it vehemently, insisting she loved me dearly. I believed her. Anyone who had lived with us all these years would not have suspected otherwise, as the family always came first for her. That made what I discovered later even more shocking. One morning, Our daughter was having breakfast before her preparatory classes, and I decided to lie down a bit longer. My wife joined me, and I asked her to come closer. She said she couldn't because she had sprayed something in her nose. This aroused my inner Sherlock. I told her the spray ran out yesterday. She herself had bought the kids drops. She tried to brush it off, but I got suspicious. We argued. She took our daughter to school, and I, in my frustration, checked her contacts. Thankfully, autofill forms work wonders. Thanks, Google. From that moment, my life split into before and after. The world I knew ceased to exist, no exaggeration. I cried like a child. The gist was this. For over a month, she had been seeing someone else. Yes, sleeping with him. The urgent business trips. They weren't just hookups. They involved full-fledged romantic getaways. The most challenging day of my life followed, filled with mutual accusations and confrontations. Imagining such a situation, you might think you'd handle it with a stony expression, demand a divorce, and walk away proudly. In reality, I wasn't prepared. Just that morning, I was a happy person, albeit with reservations, but still happy. Now I had nothing. It felt like receiving news of a loved one's sudden death. That analogy comes to mind because one moment you're talking to them, and the next, they're gone. I told her I'd break his legs. She said it wasn't about him. It was about us. Sure, we tried to sort out the divorce formalities, but I was practically on my knees, begging her to give us a chance and not leave me for him. My self-respect plummeted. Her position was that it was all my fault for not paying enough attention to her, which was partly true, though a lame excuse. She said he wasn't the issue. It was about us. She didn't know if she wanted to try to fix things or not. She needed time. I felt there was no life without her, but the betrayal gnawed at me like a worm inside. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The thought of her business trips and massages after work consumed me. So, dear experts, here's my question. Is it worth trying to fix things? Experience from the first part suggests it's possible. If so, how do I get her to come to the same realization? She claims she doesn't know what to do. And if it's possible, how do I overcome such a betrayal?